The things I do to make these videos for you, I'm absolutely freezing right now. It's about -1, and as you can see behind me, the tunnels that we grow, or I grow in at work, are absolutely covered in snow. We've probably got about 2 or 3 centimetres on the ground. It's a bit patchy, but it's absolutely frozen. Really cold this morning. And I wanted to make this video because I've had so many questions from people who are really concerned about the cold weather and what that means for their growing, what that means for you growing your plants. And it's a really good question. I think a lot of people are really worried about the cold. So many questions I get are the plants hardy? How do I protect them? Will they survive the cold? And I want to make this video just to address it head on. Will the cold kill your plants? Is it something to worry about? The first thing I've got to say is you've got to understand the needs of the plant. Just remember, the key to growing plants is making them happy. It's really simple. You just match the plants with the conditions that they'll enjoy. That's all there is to it. You've got to really dig in and understand the nature of the plant, but you can make some generalisations. So when people ask, are plants hardy? Do plants need protection? It's not a stupid question, because a lot of people don't have knowledge about these plants. You've got to divide the plants into categories. So hardy or not hardy. That just means, will they survive a frost or not? Will they die when the weather gets cold? There's so many plants that will absolutely not mind the cold. They actually really enjoy the cold. It sounds counterintuitive, but hear me out. So many of the pests and diseases that actually affect these plants are not hardy down to these cold temperatures that we are most definitely experiencing this morning. This is a really good thing. This is natural pest control. You've got to remember, I'm a big believer in growing with nature. So rather than using chemicals in my polytunnels, I try to invite a family of frogs in, and now we've got a thriving family of frogs that every spring, they're our private security force. They police the polytunnels and they keep the pests down. You've got to work with nature, and whether we like it or not, this is nature. That's the reality of it, and that's okay. Divide the plants into 2 categories: hardy, not hardy, and work with that category. In terms of the hardy plants, you'll find that actually the drainage is more of an issue during a British winter than the cold. And there's so many examples that I could show you as I walk around out here, and I haven't really planned this, but you can see here a little rosemary plant, absolutely covered in snow. I promise there is a rosemary under there somewhere. But rosemary is fully hardy. It really doesn't mind the cold. You'll see there's no frost damage. And once this snow melts, the rosemary plant will absolutely bounce back fine. In fact, the leaves will look quite glossy. And I think that's because all the pests and diseases have actually been killed off from the snow. And it's kind of had a spa day. I notice this every year with so many hardy plants, that they look brilliant after a really cold snap. So plants like rosemary, thyme, absolutely hardy, no problem at all. I'll try and find you some other examples. We've got some lavender here that is absolutely frozen solid, and the only damage that's going to happen is if the branches break under the weight of the snow. There's so many other plants that won't mind the cold. In the bed that you can see behind me, I've got garlic, I've got onions, and that's absolutely fine. That won't mind the cold in the slightest. So literally don't lose any sleep over that. So often people panic. These cold snaps, they're natural. The plants quite enjoy them, probably more than I do. I've just listed a load of plants that are hardy, so they can stay outside, but you've just got to make sure that the drainage is good. You've got to make sure that the drainage is okay, so when this snow will melt, they won't be waterlogged. What about the plants that aren't hardy? Well, in that case, you might need to protect them a little bit, but I think people are a bit too eager to protect their plants when it gets really cold. Hear me out on this. When we protect plants, it involves putting a cover over them, so put them inside a polytunnel, or if you're growing on an allotment, maybe a small low-level cloche, like a plastic cover. And that's okay, but you've got to remember that you're restricting airflow to the plant. So whereas you're raising the temperature, you're restricting airflow and potentially reducing light if that cover isn't completely clear, if that cover gets dirty, or like today, if it gets covered in snow. And I'm going to show you what I mean by this on a really sort of small level. Come inside this tunnel, we're just refurbing this polytunnel. Oh, the door is actually frozen. That's how cold it is today. Now, if you see in there, it looks so much darker than it normally does. And so if you're growing in a polytunnel like this, it's actually really important to just knock the snow off the cover. And with these polytunnels, they're actually really strong. So obviously, if you're Mike Tyson, don't do what I've just done, but just knock the snow off the cover, and just, you can see straight away the light has increased in that area that I've cleared. That is really, really important, because that's going to increase the light to your plants. And when the temperatures actually pick up, I'm going to make sure that I come out here, open up that door, and actually increase the ventilation. I guess what I'm saying is, don't overprotect plants. Make sure you make that distinction that I said right at the start between hardy and not hardy. Make sure you get that right, because that's really important. There are some edible plants that will survive in the cold, but they won't enjoy it and they won't be productive. And I'm all about growing food, so it's really important that you create spaces in your growing space that provide the conditions that you need. That's very atmospheric lighting behind me, isn't it? A winter morning if ever I saw one. I'll show you one of the spaces that I've created just here. You see, I've got this raised bed that I've actually built. And if I lift this cover off, I mean, before I knocked all the snow off this morning, there was, you know, a good covering of snow on this, not much light getting through to the plants. And you can see underneath here, lots and lots of crops that would be a little bit sensitive to the cold. They'd stop growing in these conditions. And I've created this covered space to give myself that option. So when you're getting ready for cold weather like this, dealing with cold weather like this, create spaces like that give you the option to harvest a little bit and grow a bit more. My front garden food growing space is absolutely covered in snow, and I really, really don't mind, because I've planned for this. Everything's fairly hardy. The things that aren't hardy are under cover. The final thing that I would say isn't a gardening tip, it's a life tip. When the weather's like this is nature's way of saying, take a break, take a pause. Do you really have to go out today? Sit by the fire, grab a gardening book, plan for next year, watch gardening videos like this, inspire yourself, educate yourself to grow food, because it's really, really important. In fact, I would argue it's never been more important. Thanks for watching this very atmospheric winter video, guys. See you later.